Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for CE3's Energy webinar today, Energy Options for Ohio Agriculture. I am going to hand it over to Scott Miller, our director, to begin the presentation, and he will take it away with some introductions and some opening remarks. Scott?
Thank you, Alyssa. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and on behalf of Ohio University's Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs, I'd like to welcome you to the 6th installment of our 2013 Energy Webinar Series. As Alyssa said, my name is Scott Miller, and I'm the director of the school's Consortium for Energy Economics and the Environment, which is also known as CE3. Today's webinar, which is entitled Energy Options for Ohio Agriculture, is made possible through a grant from the US EPA to help Ohio stakeholders better understand the emissions implications of their energy options. The grant activities for this project include workshops and webinars such as this one to discuss current trends in Ohio energy and emissions. Also under the grant, Ohio University is maintaining an online database that we created to track and analyze statewide emissions, including those from point and non-point sources. Just last week, the US EPA hosted a listening session outside of Washington, D.C. to hear supporters and opponents weigh in on the agency's plan to lower the federal targets for corn-based ethanol and advanced biofuels for the 2014 Renewable Fuel Standard. This comes after weeks of national attention around this proposal and has pitted the agricultural community against the oil and gas industry in a battle over market share and the future of liquid fuels in America. Our presenters will undoubtedly have an opinion about this and other issues at the nexus of agriculture and energy as it plays out at the national level and in Ohio. Today's webinar will indeed touch on the RFS, but also how Ohio's agribusinesses, researchers, and producers are leading the way for innovative projects to reduce their energy costs and emissions footprints. Our expert panelists cover a variety of perspectives, and I'd like to extend my personal thanks to all of them for participating today. I have several logistical responsibilities in opening up the meeting. First, if you have a question to submit to our panelists or our staff during the session, we ask that you type it into the question field on the GoToWebinar navigation pane. We will try to get to as many questions as possible after the presentations have concluded. Secondly, a link to a brief online evaluation is going to be mailed to you after the webinar. Please take a few minutes and provide us with some feedback of today's session so that we can make future sessions even better, and we really do pay attention to those. Finally, a recording of this webinar will be posted in the Resource Center section of our website, www.ohio.edu/CE3. Watch for more information about our outreach efforts in 2014 after the first of the year. It's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's webinar, Tony Logan. Tony was appointed in November of 2008 by the Obama administration to serve as the State Director of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Ohio Rural Development Agency, the economic development arm of in Ohio. He oversees 5 offices in the state and administers a $650 million annual budget in the areas of rural low-income housing, business and industrial loans, water and sewer infrastructure, and renewable energy project financing, including wind, solar, and biomass. Prior to his appointment, Tony served as Chief Legal Counsel and Wind Policy Coordinator for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in Columbus. In this position, Tony managed the legal affairs of 11 OD&R divisions, including wildlife, mineral resources management, parks, watercraft, natural areas, and soil and water conservation. Tony began his career in state government as an Assistant Attorney General, serving the Division of Criminal Activities, and then moved to the Ohio Department of Agriculture, rising to become the Assistant Director of the agency. Tony is a native of Trumbull County. He's also a partner in private law practice with an emphasis on agriculture and agribusiness in addition to bankruptcy, real estate, and oil and gas law. Tony's family operates an 850-acre grain and dairy operation in northern Trumbull County. So with that, Tony, I'm going to turn things over to you, and I look forward to a great webinar. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Scott, and my thanks to the OU Voinovich School for organizing this event. We have a top-flight group of experts today who will be addressing topics which, as Scott insinuated, could not be more timely, given the current deliberations in Washington, both on the renewable fuel standard and on the reauthorization of the 5-year Farm Bill, which is presently in conference committee. Very quickly, I will indicate that our presenters will start off with Dale Arnold, the Director of Energy for the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, followed by Mel Kurtz of Quasar Energy Group, and then Tom Bias of Growth Energy will clean up, then we will open up all panelists for questions at the end of Tom's remarks. The USDA Rural Development Agency, as indicated, is the Economic and Community Development branch of USDA, and there's me or someone like me in every state in the union who oversees USDA programs in the various states. We have a very strong field organization and a lot of outreach to stakeholders throughout. And this is our mission statement with respect to renewable energy, engaging the entrepreneurial spirit of rural America in the development of renewable energy. Could I have the next slide, Alyssa? I always enjoy putting this slide up because it demonstrates the historic bipartisan support for the USDA energy title and renewable energy programs in general. Here are two State of the Union addresses by two presidents of opposing political parties, both advocating the creation of homegrown energy, and both of whom have been forceful advocates of renewable portfolios, not only in biofuels, but also they have adopted wind and solar production tax credits and other incentives for renewable energies. Could I see the next slide, please? As a result of the 2002 Farm Bill, the USDA's flagship program for small energy development was assembled in various states around the country. It is called the REAP, Rural Energy for America program. We use this program to help support small wind projects, both in on-farm applications and applications for small businesses and nonprofits. This program provides 25% grants and loan guarantees for smaller projects in the renewable energy area, and was once again adopted in the 2002 Farm Bill, but reauthorized in the 2008 Farm Bill, and we're anxiously awaiting to see whether or not the Conference Committee will provide a strong energy title in the present negotiations surrounding the Farm Bill reauthorization in Washington. Could I have the next slide, please? There are several other areas within USDA that warrant some discussion if we're talking about the strong assets in the energy arena. And one is the Rural Utility Service. This was the agency within USDA that was originally created as the Rural Electrification Administration under FDR. It has now evolved into the lender of first resort for the nation's rural electric cooperatives and smaller investor-owned utilities that serve rural populations. It has a typical budget allocation of about $6 billion, so it has a very large footprint in vast swaths of the country, providing Treasury rate loans for transmission, electric generation, and smart grid. And in addition, as a result of the 2009 Stimulus Act, has a very strong presence in financing broadband in small towns and rural areas. Then more recently, as part of President Obama's Climate Action Plan, Rural Utility Service was tasked with channeling a large amount of its resources towards renewable energy projects on a utility scale. They are now helping to finance and seeking additional partners to finance utility scale renewable projects in small towns and rural areas. And this would include wind and solar. And they are presently working with developers in the Southeast Ohio area on a possible 50 megawatt solar PV project in Noble County. Then more recently, as a matter of fact last week, Rural Utility Service announced a new program allocating $250 million for energy efficiency projects throughout the system of rural electric cooperatives in the country. And this can provide, once again, Treasury rate loans, which is some of the best cost of funds in the country, for rural electric co-ops and their customers to institute energy efficiency programs that would include home energy weatherization, but also smart grid and other transmission upgrades that will provide energy efficiency savings to once again to promote the President's Climate Action Plan for carbon mitigation. Next slide, please, Alyssa. We've always known that agriculture was our country's resource for food and fiber. Now it's important to understand that we provide food, fiber, and fuel. And we're going to have a lot of discussion about how agricultural resources and agricultural waste can be used to provide fuel and electricity. But there are two programs that I thought might be interesting to focus on very quickly at the USDA national office level. Those include the USDA Farm to Fly project, and this is a memorandum of understanding among USDA, U.S. Department of Energy, the Navy, the Air Force, and commercial air carriers, with the goal to create and facilitate a viable supply chain and industry infrastructure for aviation biofuels. The military, both the U.S. Navy for fleet operations and aviation, and the U.S. Air Force, both have very strong mandates or goals to achieve up to 50% of biofuel capabilities by 2025. And they are first adopters for a lot of the biofuel that's going to be coming onto the market. Another area that it should be of interest to those of you who are from Ohio is the BCAP program, or USDA's Biomass Crop Assistance Program. This is a program that was funded in the 2008 bill that provides subsidies for growers and end users of dedicated energy crops. And this helps to provide the sourcing for the biomass inputs that can be used for either fuel or electricity generation or other uses in bioproducts in general. And we're very excited in Ohio to have the center of miscanthus production in the United States now. The county of Ashtabula in far northeastern Ohio and their colleagues across the border in northwest Pennsylvania have planted around 5,000 acres of miscanthus, which is generally considered to be one of the most efficient new dedicated energy crops in terms of biomass conversion to energy. So these are some of the areas where USDA has hopefully provided some assistance and leadership to the agricultural community and then utility users in general. But we are lucky today to have three experts that can give us an indication of the much more wider swath that agriculture cuts in the energy arena. And we're going to start out by giving the participants a bit of a generalist view of what's going on here in Ohio. And we're very lucky to have Dale Arnold, Director of Energy, Utility, and Local Government Policy for the Ohio Farm Bureau. And I suspect many of you on the call have known or interacted with Dale over the past few years because he seems to be omnipresent around the state and spends a lot of time behind the wheel. But Dale did start his career with Ohio Farm Bureau as Organization Director in 1985, and has more recently been promoted to Director of Energy, Utility, and Local Government Policy. During his tenure there, he's managed self-help energy aggregation groups, research projects on electric load profiling, energy efficiency, and on-site generation. He's helped in the net metering of a lot of on-farm and small-town energy projects and interconnection activities as well. He's now focusing also on biomass energy and is a leading resource for not only Farm Bureau members but agriculture in general in answering questions in pipeline development and oil and gas exploration in the Marcellus and Utica shale. He is now involved in regional and state working groups on oil and gas exploration, pipeline easements, and is also involved in the installation of the utility scale wind farms in the western part of the state. Dale's a native of Knox County, where he is fond of saying that his family can trace their involvement in agriculture back to the 1820s. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Dale to the microphone for your presentation.
Thank you, Tony. I really appreciate that. I hope everybody's feeling well today, and I'm pretty sure you can see my program there. Yeah, I travel all over the state. I've been with the Farm Bureau for 28 years. And a lot of people are finding out, too, and Tony is right. We were leaders in food and fiber production in the 20th century. Those demands and challenges are not going to go away. They are continuing to grow in the 21st century. And many people are finding out, too, is that energy development is also one of those challenges. In the 20th century, we had 2 challenges per acre, food and fiber. We now have 3, food, fiber, and energy. Say I travel over the state, and also, too, when we talk about energy development on the farm, kilowatt level behind the meter, creation of fuel, megawatt level with regard to transmission line capacity, oil and gas, and those things. Farmers are involved on both sides. And it's interesting, too, is that many rural communities, many residents, both in the urban, suburban, as well as rural areas, are finding out that they're working together with farmers and others in a community-like approach to do a number of things. And let me show you why. Alyssa, let's go to the next slide. Here we go. I start with this, and I tell people this is reality, and farmers really get it. You know, farming is a commodity-intensive business. A lot of farmers look at the Chicago Board of Trade, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. They look at corn, wheat, beans, cattle, livestock. Everything they basically produce on the farm is commodity, where prices are determined with regard to supply and demand over time, calls, puts, collars, futures contracts. A lot of folks here at Farm Bureau and other places help them create risk management strategies to lock in a price, lock in basically insurance with regard to pricing and economic controls, create a profit. While many people in agriculture look at Chicago, my tickers take a look at this. And these are actual energy prices, and I tell people, welcome to reality here. These are actually energy prices for natural gas, crude oil, and electric generation on the New York Mercantile Exchange, where these particular commodities are traded on an annual or on a daily basis. Now, I can go on this slide for the next 2 hours, but I won't. What I need to show people with this is that you see a tremendous amount of volatility there, and that volatility is not going to go away. The focus basically to take a look at is control of energy costs for fuel as well as for electric generation. We're helping farmers and communities do that type of objective. Let's go to the next slide, Alyssa. As I said, The strategy basically is to control energy costs, and you're seeing a shift here in the first part of the 21st century is that we're taking a look at a diversified energy portfolio where you're seeing a number of different sources, oil and gas, renewables such as wind, solar, biomass, fuel, emerging technologies, a teamwork approach utilizing several different fuel sources to get things done. And we're also moving from a very centralized to a very decentralized energy, and that's for fuel as well as electric generation, energy production, transmission, and distribution system. We tell farmers is that you're going to be working with your community as well as looking at finding ways to control energy costs on the farm. You're going to be working with your friends, your neighbors, your local communities, counties, groups of counties, regions of the states to find and create what we would call toolboxes, a series of resources, both natural and man-made, as well as technologies to help you control your energy costs. And what farmers and other community leaders take a look at in western Ohio, say in Paulding County, might be different than what they're doing in Ashtabula or down in Washington County or in Franklin County. But a number of things are happening very much on the local level. Let's go to the next slide. A lot of farmers, rural residents, community leaders are taking a look at a number of things, and we say this: there is no silver bullet. There is no one technology that's going to take our need for fuel and electric generation from this point forward and address that. There is no silver bullet, but there's a lot of silver buckshot. And here's some of the quotes, silver buckshot, people are taking a look at right now. They're taking a look at utility scale wind and solar projects on farms. They're working with the Ohio Power Siting Board, and it's interesting too is this, that any energy development project, 5 megawatts of capacity or more, and yes, transmission lines come under their jurisdiction. Many folks are finding out that in the local hearing process and in the rules propagated for much of this energy development, the need for county commissioners, township trustees, local community leaders, chambers of commerce, members of Farm Bureau, rural residents, and farmers need to be involved in that process on creating a plan, creating a strategy, creating a development where energy is going to be done in the area. Folks are taking a look at on-site generation behind the meter on their particular part. That could be wind, solar, biomass, traditional gen sets using natural gas or diesel fuel. And also, too, is this, local planning issues are key. As I said, any project that's 5 megawatts or more in generation capacity, you work with the Power Siting Board through a very good uniform set of rules where there's teamwork between local as well as state, and in some cases federal government. But if it's under 5 megawatts of capacity, county, municipal, township zoning ordinances and planning documents need to be done. And we're seeing projects, yes, out in the farm. We're also seeing it in what you would call agriburbia, that area basically between cities and towns where people also want to do wind and solar, as well as in the middle of downtown. And how do you basically accommodate these particular technologies and also the rights, the needs, the concerns of others in a number of issues. Let's take a look at the next slide, Alyssa. Also, too, we talk about bioresource development. And I'm sure our friends, Mr. Bias and Mr. Kurtz will be talking about this today, but we are also seeing this develop throughout Ohio. And it's gotten to be name your own technology or name your own energy crop. We're helping farmers, rural residents, and others take a look at energy development projects on their side of the meter or at the farm, as well as on a community level with regard to biomass, biofuel, solid, liquid, and gas. You're taking a look basically at some small biomass reactors. You're taking a look at growing energy crops. You're taking a look at refinery infrastructure. You're taking a look at biomass reactors that can be used on a community level, and maybe even large-scale generation. And so many of those folks are exploring those particular opportunities today. Let's go to the next slide, Alyssa. This is also part of that silver buckshot, and size does matter. Yes, in eastern Ohio, you are seeing a tremendous amount of work in the Marcellus and Utica Shale drilling formations there with horizontal drilling, very large technology. Many farmers are taking a look at leases and easements that can accommodate that type of technology on a farmstead. They have to work very closely with a number of folks in the community, local economic development, county and township zoning, emergency management services, and others with regard to that. But also, too, it's interesting, you are still going to see traditional, smaller 20th century vertical drilling technology still being propagated in many areas of the state. You're seeing wells in urban and suburban areas, and you're seeing a tremendous amount of work and dialogue being done addressing environmental issues and logistical issues to make those projects functional, to ensure environmental safeguards, to ensure soil and water conservation, water quality, those particular types of things which go hand in hand with those types of projects and responsibilities therein. Let's go to the next slide. Infrastructure development is going to be key. If I tell you this, you might have a well, you might have a biomass reactor, but being able to take the generation or the fuel to points where you need it on the farm or in the community is key also. Transmission infrastructure development is going to be huge, and you're going to be seeing a tremendous amount of transmission and distribution system upgrades for electricity. Many of those are going on right now. Interconnection and advanced metering infrastructure. We're working with farmers who are finding out is that their traditional analog meter, with their investor-owned utility cooperative in the future, is going to be replaced with a digital two-way communication device. They're going to be asked to take a look at appliances. They're going to know the price for electricity every 15 minutes. They can buy it on time. Many of the appliances they're going to be asked to invest in on the farm will have VG chips, which means they will have a wired or wireless communication system tied into a laptop or a desktop computer, where the appliances and systems will be talking to each other to share the load and keep the price down. They'll be taking a look at battery backup systems, a number of things that complement that AMI infrastructure. Electric choice and aggregation has been the law in Ohio since the late 1990s, and many urban and suburban communities have done aggregation since that time in gas and electric. You are starting to see those programs branch out into rural areas. Farmers right now with investor-owned utilities are taking a look at choice, being able to buy their electricity from an approved PUCO CREST service provider, and many are taking a look at natural gas and actually investing in the infrastructure to bring natural gas in utility-grade areas to their farm. Pipeline development, we're seeing 35,000 miles worth of pipeline development on the interstate, the intrastate, collection systems uniting these new horizontal drilling arrays in eastern Ohio. And yes, with many of our public utilities, everything in the ground since 1955 is being evaluated, improved upon, possibly replaced. Eminent domain? Yes, eminent domain will apply to some of those projects, especially on the federal level, the utility level with FERC and the PUCO, but many of these other projects will not, which means a farmer's ability to negotiate, their responsibility to negotiate, their responsibility to create effective easement and lease agreements is huge, and we're helping a lot of folks and communities do that as we speak. Next slide. On-site technology is going to be huge. To be able to take a look at what is happening on the other side of the meter with utilities, with pipelines, transmission line capacity, local distribution infrastructure, farmers are going to have to aggressively invest in a number of on-site technologies to help them with demand-side management and energy efficiency. As part of Senate Bill 221 provisions, our investor-owned utilities are doing that right now. They have customized programs, special programs at different classifications of residential, industrial, and mercantile customers can tap into to help them save on their energy costs. Farmers are part of that, and depending on the size of the farm and their load profile, we have some farmers who are purely residential, some who are a mixture of both residential and mercantile, and some who are heavy industrial. Farmers are trying to take a look at their demand loads and how and where do they fit into these programs. They'll be investing in software and management development, new lighting technology, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning upgrades on many of their buildings. If you're basically taking a look at poultry, variable finished hog operations, cattle, and others. Insulation and sealing on barns and outbuildings. And as I said before, taking a look at a very aggressive demand-side management, energy efficiency policy, and strategy to help them find ways to control those costs. Let's go to the next slide, Alyssa. These are agriculture's challenges, and I need to say this too. Congratulations, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're here as a participant in this webinar because we invite you to be involved in this process at the local level. Farmers, again, are being asked to take a leadership position in food and fiber, as Tony talked about and I talked about early in my presentation. But we're also taking a look at energy production. We're seeing about what you would call a 25 by 25 scenario. What that means is by 2025, 25% of our nation's need for fuel, as well as electric generation, will have a direct on-farm link. We'll either be providing feedstock for a fuel or providing ground for small, medium, and large generation, transportation, distribution technologies that get energy from where it's needed, or where it's generated from where to where it's needed. Rules and regulations are changing quite a bit. We're going from a shift of black and white to gray, where local decision-making, local planning will be key in what, in creating that toolbox, what one community decides on the western part of the state, based on their resources, based on their strategy, based on what technologies are available to them, might be quite different than what's going to be happening on the eastern side of the state. Agreements, farmers are going to be taking a look at contracts, leases, easements. Even with eminent domain involved in some of those, everything and anything is negotiable. And farmers are finding out they have a benefit, an opportunity, and a responsibility to create those agreements which closely reflect the needs of their farm and can dovetail into the needs of the community. We call those local toolbox strategies. It's creating a balance with energy producers on one side, farming and agriculture, the rest of the community. How can we create that toolbox? How can we create a local energy strategy that fits a number of needs, economically, environmentally, aesthetically? Next slide, please. We invite you to get involved in those discussions, and many farmers are doing that right now because they're finding this out, is that what happens in my backyard is also going to impact in some way, shape, or form that with others, so we need to work together. We are working here at Farm Bureau to put together those energy discussion groups in many areas of the state at the local level. And their mission statement could be this: coordinated efforts involving project developers, wind, solar, biomass, fuel cell, utilities, government and regulatory agencies at the township, county, state, in some cases the federal level might need to be involved. Economic development and regional development authorities need to be involved. And yes, community groups need to be involved. That's what's happening basically in the future. And again, we invite you to work with agriculture to get involved in that particular process. Let's go to the last slide. And again, that's me. If you'd like to have more information, different things, please feel free to contact me after the webinar here, and we'd love to work with you. Tony, I'll turn it back over to you so you can introduce Mr. Tom Bias.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dale. What an insightful presentation, as always. And we are going to now Ohio's leader in anaerobic digestion, and I can say that without fear of contradiction because I think Mel Kurtz's company, Quasar Energy Group, has far outdistanced most of its competition. Mel is president of Quasar Energy Group, and he is at the forefront of building a new national industry based on building a U.S. component supply chain to create affordable, renewable energy while presenting businesses with the opportunity to develop and find a profit center from waste management strategies. Since 1971, Mel has founded, directed, and operated several businesses from startups to millions of dollars in annual sales through business planning and creative sales techniques and innovative marketing. Mel is currently the Chief Executive Advisor for several corporations, but he serves as President of Quasar Energy. He has become an industry leader in the field of renewable energy and anaerobic digestion. And Mel, without further ado, I would like to turn the conference over to you for your presentation.
Well, thanks, Tony. And Dale, it was good to hear your melodious voice today. Thanks for including Quasar in the presentation webinar. And let's just kick off. We're right in the middle. Quasar is in the middle of what Tony's responsibilities are and what Dale's opportunities are. In other words, we process the manures, the feedstock, the crop residuals, and other organics in order to convert them to energy. And the result, of course, is cleaner and energy that we decide how it's used. In other words, it's combined heat, power, cooling, or our preference, motor vehicle fuel. It's a significant contribution to the environment and an opportunity to create profit centers for farmers and other people in agriculture. And it results in, after the process is complete, the result is a concentrated liquid plant food that we call equate. Equate is, depending on the competitive cost of fertilizers, and which is predicated on oil pricing, has a market value today of about $225 per acre for farmland. We basically have three types of digesters. The one that you see is on a farm, and it's been constructed primarily. The base load is manure, but no farmer pays to dispose of manure, at least not that I'm aware of. That means that we can't build a digester and have a return on our investment if that's what we're relying on. So when a collaboration is initiated with a farmer, it includes us bringing in off-site organics that require a tip fee, and the good news is it results in a higher value fertilizer and it produces more energy. These are the types of the feedstocks that I refer to. You can see manure is there, but manure has been digested once, so the benefits of processing it, again, rest primarily on odor mitigation, concentrating the nutrients, and recovering what energy exists in it. When you add the fats, oils, and grease, sewage sludge, or some of the farm residuals, or from processors, their residual organics, then we make 1 and 1 equal 3. Why anaerobic digestion? Because it's God's plan enhanced by man. What we've done is we've built 14 facilities in the United States, in Ohio, and it's a lower cost alternative than other residuals processing methods. As I said, our value proposition rests in the energy that's created, and then the need, as Dale referred to, in some locations it might be natural gas, in other locations electric, and in a lot of locations, particularly if you're adjacent to processing facilities, it's heating and cooling. It really is a big deal because in a lot of locations, particularly rural, they might not have, they're still operating on very expensive propane, expensive by comparison, and they don't have phase 3 electric. So when a Quasar facility is constructed in the neighborhood, we reduce the odor, we make the farmer a better neighbor, We concentrate the nutrients so the land application for the full circle of agricultural activity is complemented, and then we can provide a fuel that benefits him based on the value proposition in that geography. What we've learned is the interconnects that have taken place and the electric pricing in just Ohio range dramatically from, it could be, our tie-in rates are between 3.5 cents to as high as 8 cents a kW. The decision to invest in a location is really predicated on the residuals that are available in that market area, or logistically that complement that respective location. In other words, we have we predict that we're going to project that we'll process nearly 600,000 tons of organic residuals in the next year. Well, trucks have increased dramatically, trailers, locations, and a lot of times at a facility in, say, southeastern Ohio might not have made sense because of backhauls and new types of residuals. It is. The first digester that Quasar built is at an Ohio State's OARDC campus. Many of you know that Ohio State is the largest ag university and the largest public university in the United States. Being on their Worcester campus with our lab, our engineering, and this commercial digester has been a great asset. I mean, we get to, as our Clemens Salinas, as our engineer, we get to tip it over often. We get to see the boundaries for processing various feedstocks, temperature ranges, comparing mesophilic versus thermophilic from a biological process, comparing the gas outputs, volume reductions, and the nutrient values is a big asset when you can do it, and all the participants are within a quarter of a mile from the facility. That facility is really the smallest one that we operate, and depending on the feedstocks, the COD and so forth, which really determines the degradation rate of the volume that we put in, that facility is about 80 tons, and a nameplate generator 650 kW. Ohio State is the buyer of our electric on that facility, and I'm told that in the near future there's going to be a greenhouse next to the plant that will also participate in the heat, nutrient, and the CO2 value within those greenhouses. What you see now is the Haviland Energy facility. It's in northwestern Ohio. It's down the street from a large dairy, but it's really a merchant facility. In the background, the dark square is actually the lagoon, and recently we've seen them take the effluent and land apply it. It's phenomenal. I mean, they run 6-inch hoses miles under roads, through culvert pipes, and do land application of that natural fertilizer for less than 1 penny per gallon. It's a big up for the farmer because his alternative is chemical fertilizers, and it's an up for us because it closes the loop on our responsibility for managing the waste streams. I'm not sure what I'm looking at here. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same facility. The facility, and again, that's 130 tons per day is a nominal amount. Depending on the feedstocks, we process not less than, but we can process more of it. Again, that's a 1 megawatt or 1,000 kW nameplate generator, and that's the estimated volume of liquid fertilizer, or what we call equate, annually. The Ringler farm is the Ringler, as I understand it, is the largest grower of hogs in the state of Ohio. They provide more pork to the marketplace than anybody else. Great family. It's been a very good relationship, and has allowed them to create another profit center. It's important to note that they have the manure anyway, and pork producers, of course, look for alternative feedstocks for their animals, and the lower the cost of their feed for the hogs, the higher the margin is when they take them to market. When a pork producer is in the marketplace pursuing those feedstocks, the biomass for the animals, if they oversubscribe and they can't take it, of course, they get a bad reputation, and the generator of the food waste no longer considers them a reliable source for managing those residuals. What the digester did was allow Ringler to do that in a very deliberate fashion to make sure that they always have a significant volume of food waste to feed the pigs, and at the same time, as I said, create a profit center that didn't previously exist. So the manure goes to the digester, any residual food waste goes to the digester, and a strange thing happened. They found new friends from wastewater treatment facilities and other generators of food waste. It's a great relationship. We are partners on that facility, and they liked it so much that they decided to double down, and now we're near completion of a second facility with Ringler near the Dayton area. I'm not sure I heard Alex say this, but I think I did. He likes digesters more than hogs. This was the open house that we had with at the first Ringler facility in Ashley. And the illustrious Tony Logan is in the middle of that ribbon cutting because USDA participated in several facilities we've constructed, and they've been a great advocate of anaerobic digestion and helped to promote and build credibility for the anaerobic digester industry, and of course by reference Quasar. That's Mr. Bill Ringler next to him, and to Tony's left is Alex Ringler and his family. It was a big day. I think that the fella to the Tony's left with the white shirt is the president of Farmers Bank in Indiana, and they're all on board. They're First Farmers Bank in Indiana, and they've been on board and an advocate, and have also funded the facility in near Dayton. The reason the slides go slow is I have to keep waking Caroline up because she says I'm boring her, and she doesn't hit them that fast. It's in Fairborn, Ohio, and you can see that this is the second digester, and it will be completed by the end of this month. The facilities, after permitting, generally require 100 days to construct and initiate the commissioning. We've gotten pretty good at it, and Tony and I were at a conference yesterday, so I don't want to bore him, but for the rest of you, 5 years ago we had 4 people. Today we have over 100 people. That is, Quasar does. And we're doing a lot of different things. For example, the Ringler trucks that you see here have mirrored what Quasar has done in converting some of our semis that move both our F1 and our biomass to run on CNG. I can tell you that when our trucks are running dual fuel, we save approximately $11 per hour because of the CNG fuel price alone. And Scott, you said previously, and we haven't met, but we need to get this right. Fuel isn't only liquid. Ours actually is gaseous, and we are a certified RINs facility participating under the RFS2 program, and it is a big problem. 3 months ago, we were, I believe, around $1.54 a RIN, and I think last week we were about 24 cents. The problem is when you invest $1 million+ in gas upgrade technology, and then another $1 million+ in compression, storage, and dispensers, and the revenue stream with no change in your operating logic is changed that fast. It's a consideration for the next investment you make, as in, don't do it.
Mel, this is Alyssa. This is just a word to time here, probably about 3 to 4 minutes to wrap up, and then we'll move on to the next presenter. Thank you.
That'd be great. Absolutely. It's Caroline's fingers that have slowed me down. To be clear, she's clicking away here, but Quasar's adopted a process with the help of Air Products that allows us to upgrade biogas to biomethane really affordably. And we've done that at 2 facilities. We'll have it in 2 more facilities soon. Here's the emissions that are represented, the savings, the improvement, and as I said earlier, this process, including the gas upgrade, results in cleaner air, soil, and water. We converted vehicles, I think 29 vehicles of our own. And here's the fertilizer value that just went past, and here's what we really say it is. Yeah. This is Caroline, Tony, so you know that she's the one making all these errors. It really has a fertilizer value of approximately $250 an acre, and it's again, it finishes the loop on the digester process. And progressive agriculture, we don't have to depend on outsiders to provide what's necessary to complete the agricultural process when we collaborate with farmers and the farmer collaborates with the digesters. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mel. And you certainly have, I think, shown us an example of how a progressive idea like this can lead not only to a new source of energy and profit centers for your users, but a lot of jobs. And a lot of those jobs tend to be out in the rural areas where the digesters are located. Very exciting business plan you have. Now, we have someone here that is going to talk a little bit about the biofuels issues nationally. And Tom Bias is the president of Growth Energy, which is, I believe, the leading national organization representing America's biofuel producers. Tom has been very busy the last couple of weeks, and I think we're lucky to have him at all today because he has been certainly reported by all the national media in the last 2 weeks since the EPA announced its proposed regulation on the renewable fuel standard. But Tom joined Growth Energy in 2009 as the CEO of the organization, and prior to his stint at Growth Energy, he was president of the National Farmers Union. And Tom has been was with that organization since March 1999, previously serving as Vice President Government Relations. And he'd also served on the Hill as Senior Agricultural Advisor to Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle. And prior to that, he worked with U.S. Representative Jim Jones for nearly 5 years, and before that, U.S. Senator Birch Bayh of Indiana. Before moving to Washington, Tom was a full-time grain and livestock farmer and still has the family farm out in Putnam and Morgan counties in west central Virginia with his brothers who continue to operate the family farm. So without further ado, Tom, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Tony, and I want to thank the Ohio University Voinovich School for putting on this webinar. It's very interesting. It's very topical. It really hits on the issue that's so important to rural America. Growth Energy, we represent over 80 ethanol plants nationwide that produce about 5 billion gallons annually. Most of that currently is being produced from conventional ethanol, which is primarily from corn, some sorghum feedstocks. But nearly all our plants are invested in what we call next generation biofuels production, which offers up even more opportunities for people in rural America, not just in the Midwest, but all across the country, to be able to use other feedstocks such as biomass or farm waste or human waste, whatever we can convert into energy. And it's such an exciting opportunity for rural America. You know, Tony mentioned, and I have to say, I've known Tony a long time, and people like, and the efforts of people like Tony and Secretary Vilsack and their predecessors to really find a new opportunity for rural America to prosper is paying off. We've never seen a more robust farm economy over the last several years. Farmers are getting their profits from the marketplace and not the government, and those benefits accrue to everyone in rural America, not just to those who are farmers. Creates jobs, creates a tax infrastructure that in those local communities that supports things like hospitals and schools and keeps those rural communities vibrant and viable, something that's been a challenge in rural America for a number of years. So I want to congratulate Tony and the other folks at USDA for their commitment and those who preceded them, because it's been working. This is what we've all hoped for since day one, is how do you create that robust farm economy, and it's happened. If you turn the slide, I'm sorry, the Renewable Fuel Standard, or the RFS as it's called, has been around since 2005, was the first version that was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Bush. In 2007, it was updated and increased the goals of the RFS to 36 billion gallons by 2022. But recently, and this happens in almost any industry, when there's a new product that's competing for an existing market, that's where the challenges begin. And I like to say the knives come out when you start producing and you're a market threat to someone, and that's what's happened within our industry since the RFS's passage. We're now producing over 13 billion gallons of ethanol annually, which is 10% of all the fuel, gasoline consumed in the United States. Well, those who had that market share before certainly don't like losing 10%, and most certainly want to lose anything above that as the goals of the RFS are met going forward. So this has been a battle with the oil industry over market share. Plain and simple, that's what everything you're reading out there, whether it's an excuse about ethanol, the criticisms about ethanol or biodiesel, this is really a fight over market share. You know, the co-chairman of Growth Energy is retired 4-star General Wesley Clark, and he always gives me the analogy when they created when Apple and Microsoft and IBM created the personal computer industry. The only competition and the only market share that existed out there was for a few slide rule companies. Most people didn't know how to run a slide rule, and it was an easy entree into the market. With our production, what we're all trying to do here is we're trying to take on the deepest pockets, the most entrenched industry in the world, the biggest companies in the world, in a fight over market share, and not just big companies, but big countries. You know, I like to remind people the biggest oil company in the world is not Exxon or Shell, it's or Texaco or any of those. It's Aramco, which is a wholly owned entity by Saudi Arabia, and they understand the benefits of having only one fuel choice. They don't want to see any competition. So that's what most of the fight's about. A lot of the criticisms, and I'll be glad to take question and answers later on how that works. The RFS is probably the most successful energy policy this country has passed in the past 40-some years. When we had the first oil embargo by OPEC, which brought our economy to its knees, we've seen that same scenario over and over again. It's almost like that movie Groundhog Day. How many times are we going to repeat the same thing over and over? And so as the RFS was adopted, the goal was, let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Let's have alternatives. Let's have domestically produced alternatives to fossil fuels. And it envisioned a transportation fuel system that's diversified, sustainable, and predictable. And it established numerous goals that are currently being achieved. In addition to ethanol being 10% of the marketplace, the biodiesel industry continues to grow, again, helping rural America. The next generation production of biofuels is going to come from plants. There's already significant investment in commercial plants that is starting up next year. Poet out in Emmitsburg, Iowa has a project called Project Liberty, and the feedstock for Project Liberty is corn stover off the same acreage that they're getting the corn for the corn ethanol plant. And one of the byproducts of cellulose is lignin. Lignin doesn't have a lot of market value, except it can be converted to energy. And that side-by-side operation of the corn stover into ethanol under cellulose and the conventional ethanol from corn, their fossil fuel use at that plant will drop to zero as that lignin is turned into an energy source. Again, there's so much exciting new technology coming down the road. Wood waste, farm waste, consumer waste. There's a lot of potential. In fact, the Department of Energy has estimated there's 1 billion tons of biomass annually in the United States that can be converted to energy in one source or another. If you roll the next slide, please. Energy security. Again, it was a major part of the all of the above strategy to reduce our dependence on foreign fuels. In both imported oil has been reduced by 33% over the last several years, from 60% to less than 40% of our fuel source today. We're still importing a significant portion from overseas. Next slide, please. We're spending $1 billion a day leaving this country for our addiction to foreign oil. $1 billion a day. Stop and think about how that could improve our economy and a number of challenges that we face in this nation. And nearly 40% of that is from OPEC countries, which is a monopoly. OPEC sets the price worldwide. We can drill in the United States, and we are, and that's a good thing, till the cows come home, but the price is still set by a monopoly called OPEC. And of course, 20% of that imported oil is coming from the Persian Gulf. And we all have seen the consequences of our involvement in that region. We put our troops, our brave soldiers, in harm's way. We've spent untold billions. In fact, we're spending about $80 billion a year currently escorting those tankers out of the Persian Gulf and funding economies and activities of countries that just don't like us. That's got to stop. And, of course, ethanol is produced by Americans using American feedstocks, hiring Americans here at home, and produced on our farms. Jobs, we often talk about the benefits of ethanol to our economy, jobs that can't be outsourced, and the U.S. ethanol industry has created approximately 400,000 jobs, direct and indirect, since the start of the ethanol industry for the second time in its career back in the 70s. With adoption of higher blends, E15, which is 15% blend into your gasoline, would create another 130,000 plus jobs. In Ohio, you've seen the benefits in a number of communities, 7 ethanol facilities, created or supported over 15,000 jobs since 2008. About 12,000 were construction jobs and over 300 direct plant employees and nearly 1,300 indirect jobs with a payroll of over $11 million annually. These jobs at ethanol plants and biorefineries and biodiesel, et cetera, are good paying jobs and help keep those rural communities vibrant. The benefit to farmers, and this hits hard at my heart, as Tony mentioned, I grew up on a farm. I farmed full-time for 20 years before coming to Washington, and I still own a farm. But net farm income is up 50% since the RFS enactment, projected at over $130 billion for 2013. And for those who are listening that have been involved in farming, you know, that was, we've had a number of years where it's a struggle. And you might have one good year and several bad, but we've had a sustained farm economy. And not just the crop producers, although their cash receipts were up $66 billion since the passage of the RFS in 2007, but livestock cash receipts are up over $38 billion since the RFS enactment. We have the saying in agriculture, a rising tide lifts all boats. And once you get commodities into a position where supply and demand are imbalanced, you get a good price. And because the ability of farmers to switch crops, you've seen prices come up for virtually every commodity across the board. Conversely, a sinking boat brings all down as well, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Ethanol co-products. You know, a lot of people just think we just take that corn and convert it into ethanol. They think that 40% of the corn crop just disappears. That's a gross number, but the co-products that we get out of that ethanol production, like dry or wet distillers grains, add over 1 billion bushels of corn equivalent livestock feed that is often less expensive and higher protein and higher value to the animals. And if you want to go to the next slide, please. The investment into these rural communities because of the RFS has been tremendous. And when you look at an ethanol plant that's a 50 million gallon plant, that's a significant investment, as much as $150 million into a rural community. And by rural, this ethanol is not being produced in Columbus or Cleveland or New York City or LA or Chicago. It's in small communities like Coshocton or Marion or Fostoria or Leipzig or Lima or Greenville or Bloomingburg. And that has a huge impact. And you look at the impact on Ohio, nearly $1 billion in capital investment, market for hundreds of millions of bushels of corn supplied by Ohio farmers, over 500 million gallons annually of ethanol production, and 1.5 million tons of distillers grains for livestock feed. Let's look at the benefits to the environment on the next slide, please. 33.5 million ton reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in 2012. Now, you hear a lot about greenhouse gas reductions and how, not just here in America, but around the world, we need to reduce that greenhouse gas emissions. Well, there have been a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of plans out there, but the most successful reduction in greenhouse emissions of any policy in the United States has been the RFS. We can document it. There's a lot of people that talk about it, but we don't just talk the talk. We walk the walk. We're doing it. That's the equivalent of removing over 5 million cars and light-duty trucks from our roads. It's a 4% average reduction compared to gasoline, and we're only going to get better as continued efficiencies in the conventional ethanol industry, along with commercialization of next-generation feedstocks, that number is going to continue to go up. Consumers, and this is a benefit that very few people understand of the RFS, but number one, consumers can make a choice at the marketplace whenever we can get the oil-dominated retail industry to offer up our products. And what that does for consumers, last year, about $8.5 billion in savings at the pump. Ethanol trades cheaper than gasoline. We're the cheapest fuel in the world. It's about $1 a gallon below the cost of clear gasoline today, and that's wholesale price. Higher blends like E85 save consumers as much as $1 a gallon at the pump. E15, which is 15% ethanol and 85% gasoline, is going to increase the savings to consumers even more as it becomes adopted into the marketplace. But what we're up against, besides just this overall multi-million dollar campaign by those who want to protect the current source of fuel, is Congress and the administration have both started to take a look at the RFS and whether or not changes are necessary. Thus far, Congress, in their wisdom, if you would call it that, or actually because they probably can't get anything done, has done nothing. But recently the EPA proposed a rulemaking for setting the gallon requirements of the RFS for 2014. And what that means for our industry, if that proposed rule goes forward, has us, and that's what Tony was referring to me in the press about and others, because it cuts renewable fuel utilization by 3 billion gallons compared to what the statutory requirements are currently. So we're going backwards, not forwards. It reduces the advanced biofuel obligations by 550 million gallons compared to the 2013 requirement, and it reduces conventional ethanol from 13.8 billion gallons annually, which is what we are this year, to 13 billion gallons in 2014. That's going backwards, not 14, or forward. And if you really want to look at this, there's been a lot of criticism of the RFS about next generation biofuels not being developed quick enough. That's one issue. But on the conventional side, not only are we producing more than we're capable of producing, we continue to improve the efficiencies. Every one of these ethanol plants has less energy today, less water today, gets a higher yield per bushel of corn in terms of gallons. So we're going up and forward and shouldn't be going backwards on the policy. The impact, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm sorry. You're keeping pace with me better than me directing you anyway. The impact undercuts research, development, and investment in next generation biofuels. And when we talk about next generation, we're talking about a 50-state solution. If you look at all that biomass, as I mentioned earlier, that's jobs all around America. That's economic opportunity. That's getting all our eggs out of one basket of foreign oil and putting it into American energy. And it increases, we think the RVO would increase the dependence on foreign oil, risk the future investments in production facilities and job creation. And these biorefineries, as Tony knows, are not cheap. They cost a lot of money to create, and that's a big investment to make. And without the certainty of the RFS, you basically will see less investment going into it into the future. And obviously it limits our environmental gains, and it undermines consumer choice and cost savings at the pump. And let me just close real quickly. There's a lot of criticisms out there, and as I told the organizer of this a long time ago, I could speak probably for 3 days on this stuff. But there's a lot of criticisms that just don't hold water, and facts are oftentimes ignored in these debates. But just since I've been over here at Growth Energy, I kind of have a little top 10 list of some of the criticisms that we've heard, and I'll just show you how ridiculous some of them are. We were blamed for tortilla protests in Mexico, and the sad thing about that is tortillas are made out of white corn, not yellow. And the United States, at the time of the criticism, was not allowed to provide Mexico under the NAFTA agreement with any more than 2% of their white corn needs. So it made for a great headline, but it wasn't based on facts. We were blamed for pasta riots in Italy. Now, if anyone knows anything about pasta, number one, it's made out of durum wheat. And number two, durum wheat is grown in a microclimate along the Canadian border. It's not grown where corn is grown. But it made for a great headline, a lot of criticism, and a lot of times these criticisms still float around out there for years. We were blamed for higher toothpaste prices because they were saying corn farmers were using up all the phosphate and thus driving up the price of toothpaste. We were blamed for, and I'm not making any of this up, we were blamed for higher beer prices. Now, being from Indiana, and you guys certainly from Ohio, you know there's a lot of corn turned into drinking spirits along the Ohio River over several hundred years, but it was not beer, it was whiskey. We were blamed for higher movie prices because we drove up the price of popcorn. Well, in the ethanol production process, we use number 2 yellow corn. We don't use canned corn, we don't use sweet corn, we don't use popcorn, we don't use canned corn or candy corn. We use number 2 yellow corn, whose primary purpose goes into the belly of a cow, chicken, or pig, both here and overseas. And this past year at the Super Bowl, we were blamed for shorting people chicken wings during the Super Bowl because of the ethanol and the RFS. Well, number one, there were plenty of chicken wings. And the real reason why chicken wing prices went up was because McDonald's was reintroducing their hot wings at all their retail outlets across America. And in doing so, they started buying chicken wings 18 months in advance. Once they quit and got an adequate supply, the price of chicken wings came down. And we were blamed for, and this one you hear all the time, food versus fuel. You're driving up the price of food. That's just not the case in the terms of the amount of corn, number 2 yellow corn, that's used for ethanol production. The gross amount is 40%, but because of the co-products, distillers' grains, we only use a net of 17%. Even the World Bank said that the biggest driver of food prices, it's not the production of ethanol, it's not the production of biofuels, it's the cost of oil. Food travels a long distance before it gets to the consumer. It has to be transported, it has to be processed, it has to be wrapped, it has to be stored, it has to be distributed. energy is the #1 cause, higher energy prices, of food prices. And, of course, they missed the one criticism that we were waiting for. We thought they were going to tell us we were going to have to cancel Halloween because of shortage of candy corn because of ethanol. With that, I'll stop. The bottom line is the RFS is better for our national security, our energy security, jobs that can't be outsourced, our environment, and consumers. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Tom. That's an interesting array of crimes that the ethanol industry has been charged with, and you and I can laugh about it, but these are supposedly serious arguments that the very smart people inside the Beltway tend to level against the renewable fuels industry, and we have to start speaking back strategically and with a strong voice because of the many attributes that these fuels do have towards our economy and the necessity that we keep this industry viable for our future. Well, we are right on schedule, and I really want to thank our presenters, but now we have time to answer a few questions before we tab out at the end of the half hour. So if any of you have questions, feel free to type them in, and between Alyssa and I, we will attempt to answer them. I know I saw one earlier, and that was aimed at Mel. And Mel, if you did talk a little bit in your presentation about the use of the methane you're generating for to either spin a turbine for electricity or to scrub it for CNG. What sort of policy changes could be made at the state level or national level to either make that decision if you're easier? That is to say, whether you generate electricity with your product or convert it to compressed natural gas.
Well, I'm not sure. Can you hear me, Tony?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure that we need many policy changes. I think that, I say this often, but greed is going to take care of most of it. I think that the regulatory is in place, and I think that if RFS 2 still remains in force, that will inspire people to take more risks by doing it before the number of vehicles, the vehicle population exists. So I don't know if that answers the question, but and one thing that Tom, we don't know each other either, but ethanol is not the least expensive fuel. It's biogas converted to biomethane and used as CNG in motor vehicle fuels is by far the least expensive fuel. Not to debate with you, we don't have scale yet, of course, and maybe never will compared to ethanol, and I'm an advocate of ethanol, but by far natural gas or biogas from anaerobic digestion, because we get paid to make it, converted to biomethane and then compressed for CNG, is for sure the lowest cost fuel. So I don't know if that answers the question, Anthony, Tony, but
It sets the table. Tom, did you have any comments to Mel's answer?
Yeah, Tony, and I should have qualified it, Mel, as the only existing source of any quantity. And, we're $1.60 a gallon right now, which is extremely cheap. A lot of people don't buy that, but of any quantity source, and we hope everything develops in the future. We need all types of energy, not just one, and that's the whole thing. No business would ever put all their eggs in one basket, which is what we've done with our fuel source, and we've seen what happens when you do that. The economic shocks, the military conflicts, et cetera. So we need to diversify.
And as a follow-up to that discussion, this one's for Tom. Compare the carbon footprint for ethanol biofuels with other transportation fuels, including gasoline, CNG, and I think for the purpose of this question, we mean CNG from natural gas, not from biogas, and then electric vehicles.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Well, Tony, I can tell you, I can't tell you about CNG, but I can tell you about gasoline, because the RFS requires a greenhouse gas emissions threshold for us to meet in order to qualify as a low-carbon fuel. EPA determined that we're 21% better than gasoline, but that included an unproven, bizarre concept called international indirect land use change, which the scientific community has thoroughly rejected as a model that you can't really pin that on ethanol, because if land change use is occurring in Brazil, why is it occurring? Well, ethanol production in the United States, it can't be blamed for all the increased construction in the suburbs that takes out more land out of production in the United States annually than we ever do, or other uses of land around the world. Countries increase or decrease production based on their own needs, their own economy, their own citizens, and shouldn't be blamed. If you take away that indirect land use change and just compare apples to apples, we're about 60% better from conventional ethanol. With cellulosic, we'll be 86% less greenhouse gas emissions on the carbon footprint, and down the road, easily we'll reach 100. On electric vehicles, I'm not sure, but oftentimes, here's one of the criticisms that often comes up on electric vehicles, and again, this is not my expertise there, but one, you have a very big carbon footprint and environmental challenge in the construction of batteries and the mining that takes place and the disposal of batteries at the end of the day. And two, it depends upon what kind of feedstock is used to produce the electricity.
Sure. We have about 4 other questions, so I'll go through them pretty quickly. And I'm going to combine 2 from Sarah Davis. Both, I think, are directed to you, Mel. Has a life cycle assessment of greenhouse gas emissions from anaerobic digestion been calculated and compared to ethanol life cycle emissions per unit energy produced? And the second part of that is, what is the maximum ratio of methane to carbon dioxide emissions that you have achieved in a Quasar facility?
Well, first is, here's my best guess. I'm probably not the right person to answer question 1, other than let's assume that we don't digest the manure and or the food waste goes into a landfill. It has to be, anaerobic digestion has to be considered a much better alternative than letting the methane escape into the atmosphere, because it does not, of course, when we either use it for electric or for motor vehicle fuel. So my answer is that logic would dictate that it's a much better alternative than letting it decompose in the atmosphere. The second is, depending on what the feedstock is, the methane content can go up or down. So I would say on the low end in our digesters, we're at probably 55-ish% methane, and as high as 72% methane. However, when we take the biogas and we separate it with the membrane technology I mentioned earlier with Air Products, we're at 99-point-something% methane, and it's bone dry. So it's actually better than pipeline quality gas. I don't know if that answers the question. I hope so.
Let me ask Scott, do we have time to ask a few more questions, or do we have to wind things down?
I think we need to wind things down, Tony.
Okay. I'll just note that Charles Hoy has some questions directed to me, and I will send you out an email answering those questions. And with that, I will once again give my sincere thanks to these presenters who took time out of their schedules to present today. If you would have had to pay for this course, that would have been a pretty hefty fee, but for some reason the OU Voinovich Center has found out a way to prevent these sort of timely seminars for free. So we invite you to participate in future seminars from the CE3 Energy program at the Voinovich School. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Tony, and I appreciate. I will also send my appreciation to you and to all of our presenters, to Dale and to Mel and to Tom for your time today, and to all of you who joined us today. I do want to implore all of you. You will receive an online survey about today's webinar. Please fill that out. Give us some feedback so that we can continue to improve our future offerings. We're in the process right now of developing our program for next year, and you will be getting more information from us on that after the holidays. And we look forward to continuing to provide these into the future. And finally, I want to wish you all a safe and happy holiday season, and we look forward to engaging with all of you on the other side of the holidays in 2014. Best of luck to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. And with that, we'll sign off.